Hey class, I want to review some division strategies with you in the form of a story problem. And since it's a story problem, we're going to also be going through the process of RDW, read carefully through the problem and making sense of what's going on, and then drawing a labeled sketch, um, using numbers or words to show our thinking, and then finally W, writing a solution statement with units so that we are clear about what our answer is. So I wrote a story that is kind of similar to the stories on the back of your worksheet for assignment number 2, the sharing problems. Okay, you have 2 story problems there that you're working on. One deals with money and one deals with seashells. And then you have a challenge problem at the bottom if you choose to do that. So I'm going to kind of ask you which one of these questions is this more like when we get to the end, if I can remember to do that. Because as 4th graders, we also, since we already know this is a division problem, I'm telling you what the topic is. In 4th grade, we start really thinking about, well, what can you do with remainders if you have any? Now, there are lots of options for remainders. You can split them up into smaller pieces and divide them out equally. Or you can do something with the remainder like, well, it depends on the story. So, like, are you going to split the remainder into smaller pieces, or are you going to have to do something with that remainder within the context of that story? So let's go through the story that I wrote, and then we'll talk about some division strategies that we're trying to move away from. Not move away from, but build upon. Okay, so let's just read the story and you'll see what I mean. Doug is giving his old video games to his 2 younger brothers. If Doug splits his 25 video games equally between them, how many video games does each brother get? Okay, so think about the story, kind of start acting it out in your head. What does this kind of feel like you're doing? Does it sound like you're putting those numbers together and coming out with a sum at the end? Does it seem like you're finding the difference between the two? Between 25 video games and 2 brothers? Does it seem like that you're going to be multiplying those 2 numbers? 25 video games times 2 brothers? Does each brother have 25 video games? Or does it feel like you're starting with 25 video games and you're equally dividing them out into a certain number of groups, or you're dividing 2 out into each group? What does it sound like you're doing? Hopefully you're thinking, well, I'm starting with 25 and I'm splitting those out equally to the 2 brothers. So I have a group here and I have a group here because I have 2 brothers. Now Doug is not keeping any, so he's not part of the story. He is part of the story, but he's the one giving them out, right? So we have 2 equal groups. So I'm already thinking I have to divide 25 up into 2 groups. And just to get, right now we're reading carefully, so I've got 25 video games, and he's got 2 brothers, and he wants to split them equally, right? So that's kind of the important information there. And so if I'm thinking and planning out, I'm starting with 25 video games, and I'm going to be dividing them into 2 equal groups. And that's going to give me some number of video games that each brother gets. And so we learned this year that we can, if we don't know part of an equation, we can put a variable. So since this is video games, I'm just going to use the variable V for video games. So how many video games does each brother get? And that kind of gets us started into our thinking. Now we've got to go, so we've done R. Now we've got to do the D part. We have to demonstrate our thinking, okay? We have to either draw a labeled sketch, we have to use numbers, or we have to use words to show how we're going to do this. Now, in 3rd grade, you learned how to kind of make equal groups. And if you still need to do this, that's fine. But I do want to encourage you to start breaking away from that, because our numbers, our dividends are going to get much larger, especially in 5th grade. We're going to get into the hundreds and the thousands, and we're going to be splitting thousands of things into equal groups. And trust me, you don't want to draw 9,999 dots. It's just not realistic. It's not efficient. So we need to build our number skills now as 4th graders so that we can be more efficient with our time. And yeah. So in 3rd grade, you probably learned how to make 2 circles, 2 equal groups, and then that represents my brothers, right? Brother 1, bro 1, bro 2. This is labeling my sketches, by the way. And then you start putting dots for the video games. Each person gets 1 dot. So that's 2 video games. Each person gets another video game. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do with that last video game? There's 25. Think about the story. Are you going to split that video game in half? Are you physically going to cut that video game in half? And it still works? No. That video game is a remainder. And Doug gets to decide what he's going to do with it because it's his property. So we'll talk about how we're going to answer that in just a minute. Okay. So that is equal grouping, okay, in circles. And it's fine for numbers when you only have to use 25 dots, right? That did not take very long, okay? So right now our answer for B is 12 with a remainder of 1. As 4th grade, I'm hoping that you can go back to more at the beginning of the year because we were going to work on division this last part of school. And so it breaks my heart that we're not going to be able to do that new learning. But we started looking at division within arrays, and we used our base 10 area pieces here, okay, to start trying to build this a lot quicker. And I know a lot of you are probably like, this problem is so easy. I don't even have to draw it out, Miss Lucas. I see it in my head. That's great, but we always show our thinking what our brain is doing, what our brain is processing. So hopefully, this is more 3rd grade. We want you to cross over to 4th grade and start building array models or start thinking of it in those terms. So if I have 2 brothers, I'm going to use those 2 blue linear pieces like this, okay, to start building my array. Those are my 2 brothers. I'll label it here. Because in RDW, we label our sketches. 2 brothers. And we don't know how much each brother gets, do we? So this is the V up here. We don't know what V is, okay? But we do know we have 2 brothers. So that's the first part of my rectangle. Now, this is where you start thinking about multiplication. Well, 2 times, if I give each person 1, that's just 2. So we start thinking multiplicatively because we want to go faster. So this is my recommendation to you. Start thinking about 5s and 10s, like easy numbers to multiply quickly in your head. So I'm going to go with the number 10. I think I can give each brother a whole strip. I can give each brother 10 video games. So I'm going to fill in that area model there. What's 2? I'm going to turn this around because I feel like it looks confusing. What's 2 times 10? It's 20. So right now I've taken care of 20 video games in one full sweep instead of doing 20 individual dots. I took care of it. I said each brother can get at least 10 video games. Yay! We're working faster. We're working smarter, not harder. Now that still leaves me with how many video games? So right now I had 25 video games. Right now I've given away 20. Okay, so that leaves me with 5 video games. 5 video games. And by the way, if parents are watching this, this is so cool about division. Like, it is my favorite thing ever. Okay, so you'll probably notice this looks like what you would be doing inside the division symbol there. Okay, you're dividing by 2. Do you notice how the array here, the area model, looks like that division symbol? It just has this cut out of it because we don't know how long this is, and so we've got to keep removing things and putting things up here until we know. And so we tried 10, okay, and 10 times 2 is 20, and we had 5 left over. Now, what are we going to do with those 5? Well, 2 brothers, I know my basic facts. 2 times 2 is 4, so what if I give each brother 2 more? Build that array. 2 times 2 equals 4. So I'm going to put that at the top there to add to the 10 that I have. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. So right now in my array, I have 20 plus 4 is 24. And then that means I have 1 left over. I have a little lone ranger over here. This is my remainder of 1. Remainder of 1. And so if you look here, I'm going to remove that for a second, put it back here. Wish I would have given myself more space. If you notice, our quotient then is the 10 plus the 2, which is 12, okay? And then our remainder is this 1, so 12 remainder 1. And we use an area model to get there. Now you might be saying, well, that took just as long as that. So why is that any more efficient? Because we're going to move to larger numbers. We're going to move to, in fact, in your story problems, you have to split 42 shells, which is not unbelievably bad. But you're going to get into 75 and 126 and 347. And when you get there, you don't want to be drawing that many dots, okay? This is a very simple problem. And so I'm hoping that you remember and you see the connection of this to that, and how going from a real, like, very specific sketch where we individually see this to something a little bit more abstract, but you are understanding the array and the area model for multiplication, and now let's use that for division. And then finally you'll get to a point where you don't need to label sketches anymore, but you can just do it with numbers. And then you'll get to a point where how your parents do it and older family members do it. Even this is the way I learned it. I didn't learn how to do it this way, but I think this is so cool. And when I figured out this way and the relationship of this way, I was like, oh my gosh, it all makes so much sense. But the long division way here, 25 divided by 2, you hear people say 2 goes into 2 how many times? 1 time. Well, that 1 does not mean 1. This is place value based. That 25, the 2 means 2 tens. So when we place that 1 there, we're saying 1 10. Look, it's the same thing as this. It's 1 10. So, but then we say 2 times 1 is 2. That 2, though, is in the place value space. It's in the tens place. So we're doing 2 tens minus 2 tens, which is 0 tens. Okay? Which is what we did here. We did 20 minus 20. 20 minus 20, and we don't have any left. We don't have any tens left. But we do have 5 ones left, and that's why you hear people say, bring down your 5. Bring down your 5. This is what is going on. Okay? And then so you say, how many times does 2 go into 5? 2 groups of what is 5? 2 times 2 is 5. 2 times 2 is 5. Oh, no, not 2 times 2 is 5. 2 times 2 is 4. But those are 2 ones. 2 ones, right? 2 ones. 2 groups of 2 ones is 4 ones. and then we have 1 left over. So you are going to eventually get to using long division more. That comes actually in 6th grade. 6th grade and middle school, that's when you really start to use all that you've learned from 3rd grade, 4th and 5th grade, and then you start to apply it in 6th grade using long division. So it's coming, okay? I promise you, it's coming. But I hope I made this make sense to you, or at least I hope, if parents are watching, I hope I made it make sense to you guys a little bit more while we go from very concrete to semi-concrete to abstract things. It's called the CSA model: concrete, semi-concrete, and then abstract. Because this is very confusing if students only learn this way first. They only see this first, then they're just memorizing steps. Right now I'm talking to parents, but I'm also talking to you kids. If you only see it this way first, but never learn and go through the process of this, and then using those relationships to tackle this, it's very confusing. It's very like you're just memorizing steps and not understanding why it works, and that kind of defeats the purpose, or not defeats the purpose, but it affects problem-solving skills. It makes jumping into harder problems more difficult for kids because they have none of this concrete foundation to go back upon if they have to. So, we're not done with our story. Oh my gosh, I'm getting off on tangents. Okay, so now we've done the work. Now we've got to write a solution statement. We've got to answer the question. How many video games does each brother get? Do they get 12 and a half video games? No, they get 12 video games. Each brother gets 12 video games. Now here's where you need to tell what you're going to do with the remainder. This story, you can be very creative. Doug can do anything he wants with it. You can say, Doug will have to figure out what he's going to do with the extra, or Doug decides to sell his last video game, or Doug decides to keep the video game for himself, or Doug chooses to keep his favorite video game for himself and still plays it. You can be as creative as you want. Here I'm just going to say that Doug sells the remaining game to a friend. And that's called interpreting the remainder in 4th grade. What do you do with the remainder? You can't always split it up into smaller parts. And you can't just say remainder 1. That's not what we do in real life. We do something with the remainder. Whether we stick it in a closet, whether we throw it away, whether we sell it to somebody, or whatever. What do you really do with those remainders in real life? You don't just say remainder 1. You do something with it. So really apply it to the story. So I hope that helps. Which one of these stories do you think this is most like? Do you think it's like the money problem, or do you think it's more like splitting the seashell problem? Hopefully you're thinking it's more like the seashell problem, Miss Lucas, because can you really split up seashells? I mean, I guess you technically could, like, take a saw to it and split a seashell, but are you really going to do that in real life? Are you really going to split a shell up and give out the pieces, or do something? I don't know. But you be creative with how you answer those stories and tell what you're going to do with the remainders, okay? So I hope that helps. You review RDW. We did the W part. We're done with this problem. We've got our work for D, and we've got our solution statement for the W, the writing the solution statement. So hopefully we're all good with basic division now, and I'm hoping next year you'll be ready to jump in with bigger division, with bigger numbers. I think you will be. I think you're pretty fabulous kids. So have a good day.